was thick, muffling sound and sight. Where it parted, Will could see the street rising ahead of him, slick and wet and black with rain, and hear the voices of the dead. Not all shadow hunters could hear ghosts, unless the ghosts chose to be heard, but Will was one of the few who could. As he approached the old cemetery, their voices rose in a ragged chorus, wails and pleading, cries and snarls. This was not a peaceful burial ground, but Will knew that. It was not his first visit to the Crossbones graveyard near London Bridge. He did his best to block out the noises, hunching his shoulders so that his collar covered his ears, his head down, a fine mist of rain dampening his black hair. The entrance to the cemetery was halfway down the block, a pair of wrought iron gates set into the high stone wall. Any mundane passing by could see the thick chain that bound the gates shut and the sign declaring it closed. It had been 15 years since a body was buried there. As Will neared the gates, something no mundane would have seen materialized, a great bronze knocker in the shape of a hand. The fingers bony, skeletal. With a grimace, Will reached out one of his own hands and lifted the knocker, letting it fall. Once, twice, 3 times. For several long moments, nothing happened. Beyond the gates, Will saw mist rising like steam from the ground. Slowly, the mist began to rise and coalesce, taking on an eerie blue glow. Will put his hands to the bars of the gate. The cold of the metal seeped through his gloves into his bones. He shivered. It was more than an ordinary cold. When ghosts rose, they drew energy from their surroundings, depriving the air around them of heat. The hairs on the back of Will's neck prickled and stood up as the blue mist swirled, forming into the shape of an old woman in a ragged dress and a white apron. "Hello, old Molly," said Will. "You're looking particularly fine this evening." The ghost raised her head. Old Molly was a strong spirit. Even as moonlight speared through a gap in the clouds, she hardly looked transparent. Her body was solid, her hair twisted in a thick yellow-gray coil over one shoulder. "William Herondale," she said, "back so soon." She moved towards the gate with that gliding motion peculiar to ghosts. Will leaned against the gate, between them. "You know, I missed your pretty face." She grinned, and he could see the skull beneath her half-transparent skin. Overhead, the clouds had closed in on each other again. Idly, Will wondered what old Molly had done to get herself buried here, far from consecrated ground. Most of the whispering voices of the dead belonged to suicides, stillbirths, prostitutes, those outcast dead who could not be buried in a churchyard. She chortled, "What do you want then, young shadow hunter?" "I've got Malthus venom, talons of a Morax demon." "No," Will said, "that's not what I need. I need 4-eye demon powders, ground fine." If a ghost could have paled, old Molly would have paled. As it was, she seemed to flicker as Will spoke, like the flame of a candle at an open window. Will exhaled. "Surely," he said, "that's not the worst thing that anyone has ever paid you for." It was always like this, she argued, and then she gave in. Magnus had already sent Will to old Molly several times, once for black, stinking candles that stuck to his skin, once for the bones of an unborn child, and once for a bag of fairy eyes that had dripped blood on his shirt. She slid her hands into the pouch at the front of her apron. When she removed them, she was holding a faded cloth bag, tied with a scrap of dirty ribbon. She shook her head. "You think I'm a fool," she said. "This is a trap, isn't it? You Nephilim catch me selling this sort of stuff, and it's the stick for me. You're already dead. I don't know what you think the clave can do to you now." "Ha!" Her eyes flamed. "The prisons of the silent brothers beneath the earth can hold the living or the dead." Will held his hands up. "No tricks, old one. Surely you must have heard the rumors running around Downworld. The clave has other things on its mind than tracking down ghosts who traffic in demon powder and fairy blood, and I'll give you a good price." He drew a cambric bag from his pocket and dangled it in the air. It clinked like coins rattling together. "They all fit your description." An eager look came over her dead face. She solidified enough to take the bag from him. She plunged one hand into it and brought her palm out full of rings, gold wedding rings, each tied in a lover's knot at the top. Like many ghosts, she was always looking for that talisman, that lost piece of her past that would finally allow her to die. The anchor that kept her trapped in this world. In her case, it was her wedding ring. It was common belief, Magnus told Will, that the ring was long gone, buried under the bed of the Thames, but in the meantime she'd take any bag of found rings in the hope that one would turn out to be hers. She dropped the rings back in the bag, which vanished on her person, and handed him a folded sachet of powder. He slipped it into his jacket pocket, Just as the ghost began to fade, "Hold up there, Molly. That's not all I came for." Her spirit flickered. "Very well. What else do you want?" Will hesitated. This was not something Magnus had sent him for. It was something that he wanted for himself. Love potions. Old Molly screeched with laughter. "Love potions? It's not my way to turn down payment, but anyone who looks like you has got no need of love potions, and that's a fact." "No," Will said. "I was looking for the opposite, something that might put an end to being in love. A hatred potion. I was hoping for something more like indifference or tolerance." She made a snorting noise. I hardly like to tell you this, Nephilim, but if you want a girl to hate you, there's easy ways of making it happen. You don't need my help with the poor thing." With that, she vanished, spinning away into the mists among the graves. Will, looking after her, sighed. "Not for her," he said. "Not for her. For me." And he leaned his head against the cold iron gate.